Welcome to the Opportunity Coalition. I need to get a housekeeping item done first. If anybody wants a free tennis racket, yes, free, there is something free in this world. I have a tennis racket that was used for less than an hour. I bought it about a couple weeks ago, and I bought it at 5:30, and by 7 o'clock, the usage of said tennis racket was done, and I blew my Achilles tendon and got surgery on it, so if anybody wants that tennis racket, it's yours. We don't sell anything at the Opportunity Coalition, so that's why I just want to get rid of it. So that's what happens. You play tennis for the first time in 10 years. Anyway, so I want to welcome all of you here. It's so good to see you all. The Opportunity Coalition, we really founded this to accomplish three primary things. Number one, to celebrate and promote freedom and capitalism and entrepreneurship. Second, to build bridges of understanding among diverse people. And third, to come into a room and just learn from others. You know, there's a lot of people with great golden nuggets of wisdom. And what can we learn from them and apply in our own lives? And I want to thank Kyle for everything that he did to help make this happen. Tonight we have three distinguished panelists that I'm very excited about. And we decided to change up the Opportunity Coalition. It used to be a monthly event. We'd bring in a speaker who had been successful in academia, business, nonprofit, whatever it might be. And we decided to go and tackle the four issues that are on the minds of most Coloradans today. And the first one we had was on the impending recession. We're hearing a lot about that lately. This one is on affordable housing. We have one coming up on education and one coming up on transportation. If you know of anyone that would be good for those latter two topics, please let us know. We'd actually like diverse opinions up here where we just grapple with some of these conversations and see what we can learn from them and how we can all make a positive difference moving forward. So with that, I want to thank Plant Moran and Scott specifically for hosting us here. As full disclosure, they do all the accounting work for all my commercial real estate deals, and they do a phenomenal job. So let's give them a round of applause. I want to acknowledge Will Feldman, who's literally the man behind the camera right now. He's the founder of Garlic Media. You should ask him why his company was named Garlic Media. It's a really, really good story. And he sponsors the video production and does all this for us for free and creates the video clips, etc. So let's give him a round of applause. And I also want to thank Monique Olson. She takes pictures of all of our events all the time and does a phenomenal job. So let's give her a round of applause. Okay, so one of the things we believe here is in promoting business. And so did everybody do the business card draw? Or do we have business cards in a draw? Did anybody do that? Carly's going to come up. Carly's a new mom. And so it's so good to have her coming back to work with us. So we're going to draw a card. And you want to put it in there too, Rocio? Rocio's going to give hers. Anyone else? Throw it in there quickly. So we'd like you to come up in 30 seconds or less, tell us about you or your business, and try to keep it to 30 seconds, and we hope you get business from it. If for some reason you don't like speaking in front of people, just give us this sign. This guy, by the way, is now up in Granby, and he's going to be here, what, a year, you said, this coming week?
Yeah, in about a week.
I love it. I love it. So anyway, you'll come up 30 seconds or less, and I'm going to also give the person who gets that a copy of my new book. It just launched this week. It's called Building. 100% of the net profits are donated away to charities. So if you know of any good charities that we can donate money to, please let us know. So with that, Carly, I'll let you do it. I might fall off my one-legged thing here. You know. Okay, who do we have? We have Richard Hughes. Wow, I've known Richard a long time. Richard, do you want to come up or do you want to give me this sign? Oh, you'll come up. Yeah, come on. Let's give him a round of applause. You doing, sir? Good seeing you.
What is it I'm to do?
30 seconds or less. Tell us what you do.
Oh, well, I do estate planning for folks, and I help them in the big picture achieve a peace of mind that they've never had before. Probably like 80% of you've never done any estate planning. Human nature, we help take care of that problem. Put that to bed, scratch that off the list, take care of your kids and grandkids, do it in great style. It's always fun for us, and it's really rewarding for you. That's what we do.
Great, love it, thank you, appreciate it, thank you. So I was at an investment conference in LA. I just got back last night, and a gentleman like Richard got up and gave a great quote from Shakespeare. And when it comes to estate planning, and that is 3 hours early is better than 1 minute late. And I thought that was pretty sage advice. So you don't know that guy. I don't really know him. So feel free to put that in your repertoire. It's all yours. Okay, I want to acknowledge our awesome advisory board members. If they could just stand and let's give them a round of applause in each one. So first we have Kyle Henderson, Chief of Staff at North Star Commercial Partners. We have Scott Bemis, Director of Business and Community Partnership at it says EKSNH. We got to change that. They keep making the slip. Plant Moran. Let's give Scott a round of applause. We have Millie Kitchen, Vice President at JP Morgan Chase. Millie. We have David Pritchard, President of Tea Garden Financial. There he is, back there. We have Sabrina Risley with Creative Counseling Center. There she is. Mr. Luke Wyckoff, who just came back from 3 months overseas, CEO of Social Media Energy. So this guy just got an awesome gig. He went and took pictures for National Geographic and has been traveling in all these exotic countries. And so ask him about that. And if you're not friends with him on Facebook, become friends with him on Facebook. And don't stalk him, though. And but he's got really, really good pictures. You do great work. We have Rocio Perez, President and CEO of Inventiva Consulting. There she is. Rocio also just created her own book called Unstoppable. It's a great book. Highly recommend you check it out. So, not that we're doing any kind of sales here. Again, the tennis racket took care of all of it for all of you. Okay, we got Mr. John Brackney, Director of Strategic Community at Webolutions. If you don't know about John, he's been running every single day for 4 years. I just butchered it. I said, hey, you've been running for 2 years. He's like, yeah, you missed it by double, you know? So anyway, 4 years he's been running every day. So he's also the founder of the City of Centennial. So talk to him. He's just an amazing guy in what he's done. We have Christina Whalen, who's a retired mortgage executive. Where is she? There she is. Okay. Did I miss any advisory board members? Okay, good. Okay, don't want to get in trouble by any, oh, wait, no, you're not an advisory board. You're an associate board. I got you. I got you. We've got Carly McQueen, Community Relations for North Star. Carly. And we got Abel Madrano, who's co-owner of High Rock Real Estate. Thank you for being here. Okay, I think we got everybody. Okay, well, let's dive in on this topic of affordable housing. First, I want to just do a quick review of who we have with us today. So first we have, let me get it in order. That would probably be good, right? I'm not that organized. Okay, we have Randy Thelen, who's Vice President of Economic Development of the Downtown Denver Partnership. Randy is responsible for guiding economic development and growing Denver's thriving economic base, including attracting investment to the center city, business recruitment and retention, housing, retail, and public policy initiatives. With a focus on recruiting and retaining employers, working with developers, financial entities, and government representatives, and attracting and planning for new development, promoting the Center City's brand as an economic hub and home for innovation in the region. He graduated from Binghamton University with a Master of Art in Applied Economics. We have Erin Goff next in line. Erin is the General Counsel of Axiom Strategies, and she brings an extensive legal and legislative experience in many areas, including land use, urban renewal, tax increment finance, condemnation, annexation, criminal and civil justice, immigration, technology, public finance, and municipal law. Prior to joining Axiom, Erin was the Senior Staff Attorney and Legislative Director for the Colorado Municipal League, where she advocated municipal policy positions before the state legislature and administrative agencies. If you want something done politically, this is a really good firm to talk to. Yeah, I know, I like it. She's a rock star. And then there's other fun stuff in her resume, which she asked me not to read, so I'm just not gonna read it. So. But she's a fun person, let's leave it at that. And if you're interested in marathons and stuff and running, she knows a lot about that. And then we were fortunate, Mike Zollner, who's a developer in town for many years, he just had surgery on his hand. He's got a bunch of pins hanging out. He kind of looks like Frankenstein, I've been told, but I don't know. So we have Mr. Michael Leccese, who's the Executive Director of ULI, who came and graciously showed up tonight. So thank you for doing that. It means the world to us. Since 2005, Michael has been an executive director of ULI, a district council of the 40,000-member Urban Land Institute. Working with ULI, Colorado's 1,400 members, He works with 50 plus ULI Colorado programs a year, including project tours, panel discussions, advisory services, leadership and mentorship programs, publications, and an awards program. In 2013, ULI gave ULI Colorado its first Impact Award as the district council with the most positive community influence. Previously, he worked as a consultant, communications consultant, and newspaper reporter and magazine editor and book author, focusing on architecture, urban design, and real estate. He's a New York native and a BA in English Literature and Journalism from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Let's give them all a round of applause. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to have each of them just do a quick intro. We're going to go down the line, and then I've prepared some questions that just to start the dialogue and open it up. And then afterwards, we're going to open it up for discussion with all of you. So write down that question that you'd like to have, and we'll go from there. So with that, why don't we get started?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So when we talk about affordable housing, to me, it's the biggest challenge, maybe try to put a positive spin on the biggest opportunity for Denver right now. We have incredible pipeline of young talent coming here each and every year. It's young, it's hyper educated, it's the type of talent that any market in the country would love to have. It's the reason why companies continue to migrate themselves. They follow the talent to Denver, and there's really only about a dozen markets in the country that have that kind of young, educated demographic profile that we're enjoying right now. And we have to find a way to maintain that edge. And I would tell you, I go back, I've been doing economic development for about 25 years now. And when you do this kind of work, you find yourselves talking with communities often about what's the strategy, where do we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years? And inevitably, a room like this would say, we want jobs for our kids so that they can stay close to home. That's always a common theme. And I think right now, the challenge for Denver is we have the jobs for kids for them to stay at home. We don't necessarily have the housing for them to stay at home. And we'll talk more as the conversation goes on, but I think it's a unique twist to an economic challenge, and we have to get this right. We have incredible advantage with this pipeline of talent, but if we can't retain it, everything we built around this great city could slip away a bit. So we have to get this right.
I agree. We do have to get this right. When I first started looking into affordable housing policy, it was back in the mid 90s when I was still in law school and I was working as a law clerk for the Colorado Municipal League. And back then, the folks that I was talking to about affordable housing were ski towns. It was the ski towns were trying to figure out how they could find housing for their lift operators, their firemen, their teachers, nurses, people like that. It's completely changed now. It's not just the ski towns. It's definitely downtown Denver. When I first moved here, I was 23 years old. I was right out of college. I didn't make any money. I just bought a house farther away. I wanted to live in Cherry Creek, but I couldn't afford to live in Cherry Creek. Nobody lived downtown yet, but I just bought a house farther away. But that doesn't work anymore either. So the conversation has changed, and it's not going to go away. But I think that it's really just starting to gain momentum, and we do have to figure it out, and I think we can.
Great. Well, I want to mention I'm very pleased to be at Plant Moran because they're a major sponsor of ULI, so it's great to be here. Urban Land Institute is a research and educational organization. We get involved in policy issues, but we're not political. And based in DC, I'm actually the executive director of ULI Colorado. There's a person who's my boss in Washington, but thank you for that call out. So our job is to call upon the expertise of our members, who are mostly real estate developers, know what they're doing, and translate that for a broader audience that can make affordable housing happen. And affordable housing is only one issue that ULI works on. There are about 5 or 6 key issues, but that's a big one. So there's actually an entire housing center in DC that does research. An example that would be, what are the side effects of having growth controls? Well, there's numbers that showing that it works really against creating affordable housing and sends things in the opposite direction. Locally, we did a report on overcoming barriers to affordable housing in Colorado in 2016. And we hired a writer, did a lot of interviews. Conclusion was, there's not any one answer. There's about 50 answers that are about 2% each. So during the roundtable, the question came up, is government the problem, or can they be the solution? Are they in the way? I mean, it can be both. I mean, government is in the way when they overregulate, and when they offer carrots, they can really be helpful. And another thing we do locally is try to train private sector developers on how to use tax credits. We do workshops on that and get them more involved in the hands-on production of affordable housing.
Love it. Thank you. Okay, well, let's dive in with some questions. So the first one, what does affordable housing mean to you? Start here and work our way.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately people, as they work, so one of our challenges in downtown, we've built this incredible downtown really in the last 20 years. Union Station is certainly the hallmark of that, but throughout the downtown, we've seen incredible development. But downtowns traditionally have been for everyone. It's sort of a melting pot. And we're losing that as we've really missed out on building some affordability into the downtown. It's a challenge. Land prices are higher, costs of construction are higher, so there's reasons for that. But we want to find a way that everybody who wants that opportunity can at least have a taste of it, have an opportunity for it. But at a macro level, Brian, I think of affordability is, historically 30% of income has been sort of the allocation of our income towards housing. And with the wages that they are 30, it's probably climbing to 35% today. In some markets, it's higher yet. But in that 30 to 35%, that level of income should be able to get you into housing in any market.
Okay, Erin?
I think this is a really good question because I think it means something different to almost everybody. I spent some time a few years ago when the city and county of Denver passed their, passed their impact fee to generate funds for affordable housing. Going to the meetings, they had stakeholder meetings, and at one point they split up into small groups and for the small groups to talk about what the money should be spent on. And everyone in my small group had a different idea of what level, like some people thought that the money should all be spent finding housing for homeless, and some people thought it should be workforce housing. And then you always hear people throwing around like 30% of AMI, 80% of AMI. Where's the cutoff? But to me, affordable housing is literally just housing that I can afford. If I make $1,000 a month, I can't pay $1,000 a month in rent or a mortgage. And we hear that 30%, you don't want to go over 30%. Well, you don't want to go over 30% because you need to be able to buy food and clothing and that sort of thing. So I'm just taking it completely literally. I think it's a house that you can afford and still be able to eat.
I'll try to take a statewide view because we're a statewide organization. It's all kinds of housing, and which part of what makes it so hard to talk about. A lot of people react very negatively to the term affordable housing. They associate that with Cabrini Green and terrible public housing projects that were blown up and torn down because they were so bad. But if you start at the base, we have a large homeless population. So what's affordable for them? Well, nothing. It's got to be provided for them along with services. You get into the workforce housing issue. You start talking about teachers and firefighters and police officers who don't have the ability to live in their community. And then really going up the scale to a place like Aspen, they create subsidized housing for doctors and lawyers because they can't compete with the billionaires, and they want to have that portion of community in town. So I think if you want to define it somewhat briefly, its affordability is the housing that creates a complete community for all kinds of people, including people that might want to work for you if you run a business.
That's great. How affordable is Denver/Colorado compared to the national norm? And we hear a lot about it being unaffordable, but is this an issue endemic to the country? And how do we stack up in general right now? I'll start here and we'll go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So if you look at Denver relative to the nation as a whole, we're quite expensive. If you look at Denver relative to our peer markets, there's been a mass migration to cities, and it's continued to move. The millennial population, and frankly, many empty nesters have chosen they want to be in the center city, and it's driving up demand tremendously. And so, but that's across the country. And so our peer cities, if you look at their housing costs, we're sort of on par with this national movement towards cities and urban core as well. Interestingly, though, if you pull back sort of the total cost of living, we're actually still fairly affordable total, but our housing element is climbed and escalated beyond the norm.
Interesting. Anybody else want to add to that or not?
I would just say that we do these new member get-togethers every 2 months, and And just in the last year, everybody who shows up for these, usually about 50 people, is from New York, LA, and San Francisco. And they come here and they're like, wow, what a deal. You know, three bucks a foot for an apartment. I love it. And it's really, it's kind of changing the nature. And I'm an East Coaster myself, but it used to be the place where Midwesterners came. And now it's a place where people come from the coast looking for what they call affordable housing.
Does anyone else want to raise their hand for what a deal? Anyone? Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's go to the next one. What are the greatest impediments to creating affordable housing in your mind? Erin, you want to start with you?
Sure. I think that one of the biggest impediments is a lot of too much government regulation. Both at the state level and at the local level. If I don't want to throw any particular governmental entity under the bus, but I think if some of them would work more together with private developers, they could lessen some of the impact fees or lessen the time periods for affordable housing, for permitting and things like that. The lower the cost, the more affordable the housing can be, because the developer can only has so much money, and then they have to charge rent or sell the house for a price that's going to cover that cost. So if the government could help the developers lower the costs, then we could build more.
I generally agree that government can get in the way. Impact fees, I think, are more of a problem than a solution. I'd add very high land costs, which goes with the nature of our economy, and a lot of widespread public opposition to development, which leads to downzoning and what just happened in Lakewood. An encouraging aside to that is there's been a counter movement developing the NIMBYism called YIMBYism, which means yes in my backyard. And a lot of young people that feeling shut out of the housing market are getting into that and actually supporting development and very dense urban development as well.
So before you answer, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when he's referring to Lakewood, for those that don't know, Lakewood recently voted in a 1% cap on growth. And so as an example, North Star, we own a piece of land out there on commercial. We were selling off a piece for residential. That deal will probably be sabotaged now because they just can't build it. And when you decrease supply, you're going to increase costs because demand is going to continue. And now there's potentially a statewide initiative by the same person who brought the Lakewood initiative forth to do it on a statewide basis of a 1% cap on growth. So wherever you stand on the political aisle, whatever you believe about economics, they're just giving you real life example of what's happening right now in our state. So we're all on the same page. You want to?
Yeah, just to build it up on your supply and demand example, fundamentally that's what it comes down to. We just have not built the supply to match the demand coming in. And if we saw a line of people around the corner of a coffee shop, we would think we need to go build or open up another coffee shop. And the challenge on the housing side is the regulatory environment and the zoning environment. The amount of land zoned for residential, and particularly the amount of land zoned for dense residential, doesn't come close to matching up with the demand that's out there. So we really have a supply and demand out of whack situation. I went back and looked at the numbers and I'm going to be off by 5-10%, so bear with me. But from 2000 to 2007, we had 60 to 70,000 more housing units built than we had households formed in the market. We were overbuilding in that time period. Recession on, we had 110,000 more housing units formed than households formed than housing units formed. 110, so excess demand, if you will, of 40,000 units over what we had in oversupply before. So we're simply not building anywhere near the volume of housing to match the level of demand. And we have to find ways to get the general public to understand that density, frankly, is part of the solution, not only a housing affordability challenge, it's also part of the solution on our congestion issue. The closer we can get people to live and work and play in closer proximity, the less we have to consume of our freeways and our roads, which I know is a hot button issue for this community.
Yeah, I often call this the unintended consequences of law, right? It's meant for good, but it has a reverberation effect. So for instance, construction defect litigation here in Colorado. It was meant to protect the homeowner, this idea that if somebody screwed up the foundation and there's cracking and hot soils, that you have some kind of a recourse. Problem is the pendulum swung too far. Nobody wanted to build that kind of product anymore because the liability was too much. It just didn't make sense. The numbers didn't pencil. So we stopped building that kind of product. Well, what happened? The entry-level housing just was non-existent. And the same thing with Lakewood. The community of Lakewood are just tired of a lot of traffic and people and all that other good stuff. So they vote in a 1% cap. It sounds good. And maybe it will be good for them. Problem is you're going to decrease the supply. And demand's going to continue and prices are going to go up. And so the very people in Lakewood will probably have some kind of increase, which then the next follow on to that we're going to hear about is rent control. Rent control is going to be right on the horizon. And, for those that came from markets with rent control, you may be able to speak more intelligently about that. Okay, whose responsibility should it be to create such housing? Is it a government solution? Is it a private sector solution? Is it a combination, nonprofit? Where would you all stack up on that? Why don't we start maybe at the end and work this way?
Definitely a combination. There are a surprising number of robust nonprofit home builders out there that build a variety of housing. The housing authorities in our region, I think, are very good and very progressive, starting with Denver Housing Authority, moving out. And they've developed a mixed income housing model that breaks up those concentrations of poverty that, create poor communities, frankly. It can be homeowners can participate. There's been a lot of communities that have discussed creating making it easier to do an ADU, a granny flat. It's part of your home. I have done this myself, and we are renting what used to be my kid's rec room to a young man who works for the University of Colorado, makes $40,000 a year, and takes the bus to work because he's the only one in his department who lives in the same community. Everyone else commutes from far away. So I think that's an interesting solution that could go a long way. The private sector, properly incentivized, can do a lot. And I think the fact that we have tax credit programs is wonderful. It's a great solution. There's just not enough of it to go around to make more happen.
Okay. Erin?
I agree that it's everybody's responsibility, and everybody is, even if you don't realize that you're contributing right now. The state legislature last session passed a couple of funding bills, and there could be up to 50 to 75 million over the next few years in an affordable housing fund that would then be given by the Division of Housing to private developers or other programs to build affordable housing. But when I say you're contributing to that, is where do you think the state's money comes from? It's our money. So everybody who pays taxes to the state of Colorado is partially responsible for some of that. So you can pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, it's clearly a combination. There's no one single silver bullet that's going to resolve this. There are some big moves taking place. You mentioned the state program. The mayor in the city and county of Denver, Mayor Hancock, put forward, and they're going to issue this fall a $115 million bond issue. Depending on how construction prices fall, that's going to be somewhere between 4,500, 5,500 new affordable housing units brought forward with those dollars. It's a big step, but there's multiple steps to take to get to a solution. I think I go back. I think it's zoning. I think it's density, and I think it's private sector finding those opportunities to advance that forward.
Great.
Could I throw in another example or two quickly? One thing I was really encouraged to learn of last year is there's an interfaith group in Metro Denver. I'm going to get the name wrong. Someone else probably knows it. But they've gotten all these faith-based organizations to survey their own properties and discover they have a fairly tremendous amount of vacant land that they don't use. I mean, it might be parking lots that aren't used. It might be a side yard to a church. And there's actually an organized effort to put those lands towards community uses like affordable housing. In many cases, the faith groups would be willing to donate the land, eliminating that problem of the land basis being so high. And I think that's a really promising direction. Same is true for government. Government agencies have a tremendous amount of vacant property. RTD has a tremendous amount of vacant property. Potential to repurpose some of those areas for housing is really great.
Great.
And we just returned from a trip. We take about 100 people to a different city every year. and just try to explore what they're doing from a best practice standpoint. And Copenhagen was our destination this year. They're putting housing on school campuses so that teachers can live. They have the land, it's available, it's open space. They have parking, so they have fields and everything else. But they have those, and we have it here too, right? We can all drive by schools and think they could put some housing nearby for teachers or police departments or what have you. So there's other ways to get there too.
Yeah. Any other creative solutions to address the issue that you want to share?
I think the density bonus in Denver has been a really good model. It's just now getting out of the ground, but trading the ability for developers to go higher and build more units in exchange for guarantees for affordable units within that development, I think is really wise. And we're going to see it in Rhino coming out of the ground pretty aggressively now. River Mile, which is another sort of the next big wave of development in the core of the city, that was part of that negotiation as well. 15% of the units will be affordable in a number of places throughout Rhino and 15% in the River Mile.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to share?
Oh, we're going to do it later.
Okay.
There are many.
So one of the things that came up in our roundtable discussion upstairs just now is partly bifurcating the definition between low-income housing and affordable housing. Would one of you just want to touch on that right quick, just to make sure that people are on the same page?
Well, maybe you could explain the term area median income, because I bet everybody doesn't know what that is all about.
I did just start throwing out acronyms. So that what I was talking about earlier when I said 30% of AMI or 80% of AMI, the area median income is the median income of the region, and 30% of that, if you make only 30% of that, then you're way below the median. If you're making 80% of that, you're not as far below. But some, like Aspen, we were talking about earlier, some areas are so expensive that affordable housing programs will be offered to people who make 120% of area median income. So.
Okay.
So when developers develop affordable housing, they aim for one of those segments, 30 to 60, 60 to 120, whatever it is. And that obviously affects their financial model.
Absolutely.
And they're very conscious of the audience they're trying to serve.
Okay. Do you see a potential recession coming? That was our Upstream Coalition discussion last time. You can get online for those that missed it. And do you believe this will help in providing more affordable housing?
So I'm going to take a contrarian view. I don't, at some point we're going to have a recession. If I knew, I wouldn't be here. I'd be doing something else with my time tonight. But let's assume there's a recession in the offing. The last recession did not curtail demand for very long in Denver. In fact, quite the opposite. I think when there's a recession across the country and you find yourself out of work in Topeka, Kansas, or you find yourself out of work in St. Louis, Missouri, you start to really question, why am I living here? Why don't I live where I would really love to work or live and enjoy life? And we saw a mass influx of people during the recession and really immediately following the recession. Because I think Denver sort of came out of the recession quicker than the balance of the country as well. So our economy is much more diverse than it was even then. And I would imagine we'll have a number of people across the country making that conscious choice too. Let's go live where we want to live. If there's no jobs here, we can go live there without a job and we'll figure that out. So I would expect it actually to go, not to suggest housing prices aren't going to come back just a touch. They will for a moment, but I think demand is going to come in another wave.
Yes, Erin?
Yeah, as Randy keeps saying, supply and demand is that's an obvious economic concept.
But some people miss it now, right? Like somebody was saying earlier that, there's a lot of government officials who miss fundamental supply and demand. That's when it comes down to that.
The only way I see prices going down because of a recession is if everybody moves out of Colorado, and you make a really good point. People aren't going to. So if they move out and there's a lot of vacant houses, then the prices are going to go down.
Well, thank you for asking us. I'm an expert on this subject, and there will be no recession, and the Colorado Rockies will win the World Series.
I guess our work is done here tonight. We are done. Everybody go bet on the Rockies.
We won yesterday. I'm really not qualified to answer that question.
Okay. I wish there'd be more politicians who would answer it like that. You know, I'm not qualified to answer that, but sorry. I don't want to get political here. Okay, let's move on. Is there a city, town, or country that has a good model or ideas for creating such solutions, in your opinion?
So I'll just share one example back to Copenhagen. They have and as a debt-averse person, this really haunts me. I can't fathom that this is a program that works, but it works really well there. They have a 50-year mortgage. 50-year mortgage. And the whole concept is that the house is something that they maybe never truly own. It's just something that is a utility that they pay along the way, and it's transferred over time. And I'm still getting my head around that too, but they raved about that as a way to get people into some form of ownership. I don't know that I personally could come to grips with that, but it is a way to open up ownership to more people. And if you're less concerned about what that end game equity position is, you just want to be in a house, that's one way to get there.
So I'm sure you're all on the same page, but the longer term you have to amortize something, the lower the cost of that capital in the short run. So if you, instead of a normal mortgage of, let's say, 15, 20, 25 years, if you extend that for 30-year mortgage, supposedly your prices will go down. You're going to pay more for that house in the long run because of this thing called interest that will keep, adding up over time, but it allows more affordability in the short run. And if you're going to stay there a while, but most people don't stay in their houses anyway, so if you're going to buy it and flip it, then maybe it's not a big deal. But just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I don't know of any other city or country or any program. I think that if there was one, then we'd probably be trying to emulate it.
I think it's very experimental. There's a lot of cities trying to deal with this right now. Minneapolis, I think, has just rezoned the entire city to encourage more multifamily housing. And the theory being that it'll increase the supply and that could lead to lower pricing and more diversity of housing. So there's that. San Francisco takes a lot of knocks for being very unaffordable, and it is. But in some of their new developments, they're doing 40% affordable housing, Treasure Island being an example of that. And there are a few European cities that have a long history of developing really high quality social housing. And not that they've solved the problem, but if you go to Vienna or Amsterdam or Copenhagen, you can see the results of, say, 70 or 80 years of this program. They have really good quality housing for working class people.
We struggle with this too, where as we look across the country and around the world, where there are examples that we could sort of emulate and apply here. There's a lot of experimentation going on right now, nothing that's really taken to scale.
Yeah.
So we've started to look back in history and trying to figure out when have we seen this kind of housing, acute housing shortage issue. And we saw it in the 1920s in this country. We saw it again coming back from World War II. The 1920s, we unveiled a pretty aggressive, that's really when the housing authorities came to be in New York City. For all the grief that the New York City Housing Authority takes today, back then it was beloved. I mean, they brought in tens of thousands of housing units in a pretty short period of time. And so there may be some models, there may be some learning from us to go back in history. And of course, after World War II, there was a GI Bill that really built a lot of the suburban part of this country.
So I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to open up to the group. But we just did a project in Aurora, a couple hundred units of residential and some retail in the corner. And we were at the closing dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I don't do residential as much, but they shared a stat with me, which I thought was fascinating. And that is there's over 7 million unmet housing units right now in the United States of America. And then the drum roll of that is over half of those are in California. So just in case California didn't have enough traffic, over 3.5 million more housing units are needed in California alone. Just a data point, pretty fascinating. Okay, last question that I'll have, and then we'll open up to the group. Some advocates have commingled workforce and affordable housing and have thus combined homelessness, low income, and middle class needs together. Does such an approach sufficiently address the complexities of the debate, or are cities more successful when they address these issues separately? That's an easy question. I don't know why there's a delay, but whatever.
It's a series of acute challenges, and I'll share a couple stories. So first of all, downtown Denver, right out my office is Skyline Park. We see some of the challenges that our community faces in terms of people experiencing homelessness. It is literally outside of our window every day. And, you know, the preponderance of people that are experiencing homelessness generally are folks with addiction or folks with mental health or both. That's the lion's share of it. And I will tell you, up until recently, I kind of dismissed this idea that the housing pricing is causing homelessness to run unabated. I think it is a bigger element. I'll tell you, when I sort of came to grips with this, I ride my bike quite a bit on the weekends, especially, and I was taking the Platte Trail or the Platte River Trail, and I wasn't paying attention. There was construction on the trail. I wandered off the trail. I got lost, and I wound up riding my bike around Globeville, right across the river from the stock show. And if you haven't been there, that's where there's a good amount of sort of salvage yards and tire scraps, and sort of every city has that area. That's where it is right there. There was about 20 to 25 motorhomes parked in there. And these are people that are building our housing or what have you, and they're living in these motorhomes. They're living in cars right there, and I saw it firsthand. And then I noticed, I live in Stapleton. There's sort of a commercial drive that parallels Central Park, and there's all kinds of motorhomes parked there of all the construction workers that are building the homes and the apartments in Stapleton. So these are folks, back to Erin's comment earlier, that there should be opportunities. They're good, hardworking people. They're going to work each and every day, and they can't find an apartment. They can't find a condo. They can't find a home that's within a price range that allows them to spend 30 to 40% of their income and still enjoy a life. And I think we have to get better at that. So there's a series of acute problems that you've identified, Brian. I think they require a series of acute solutions. We work very closely with the Denver Housing Authority, who, as Mike said earlier, very strong, highly respected group in town. And frankly, the lower in the income level that you are trying to serve, it's not just a housing solution that's needed, it's a service that needs to come alongside of it. So many people aren't taught how to manage a checkbook or manage their own personal finances. And so when we talk about, you know, workforce housing or low income housing or home, you know, transitional homes for people that are experiencing homelessness, there has to be that service support that helps them understand and recognize there is a path forward. And if they manage their money right, they can get there on that path to success.
Thank you. Erin?
I can't possibly follow that really thorough.
That was really good.
I gotta go to the restroom.
Yeah, I think my phone's ringing. That was a great answer. I agree that there's not a one size fits all solution to this, that you could lump homeless people, workforce housing, and everything in between all together. It does have to be addressed, each one in its unique way.
And just to be sure I'm understanding your question, does the mixed income model work? Or?
However you want to, address it.
Okay, well, I'll start with a slightly personal. I live in a mixed income neighborhood where you can find very low income housing for immigrant families and $2.5 million homes. And I think it works great. So I think that there's real potential. That's actually the history of how our country used to work. And I'd like to think we could get back there again. Jog my memory about a couple of other housing innovations that are worth mentioning. There's actually a really good history in this country of employer-built housing, like Stuyvesant Town in New York City, for example. It used to be like insurance companies and trades would build housing for their own people. And there's been a lot of talk about how can we encourage to go back to that model. And then in terms of innovation, if you have not been to the Denver Housing Authority's Mariposa neighborhood at 10th and Osage, it's worth it to go there because it was a really terrible all low income neighborhood, barrack style housing that's been rebuilt under the mixed income model with really interesting, diverse architecture. It does have some of the social services and training like VOTEC. And I think it's a really nice urban environment with access to transit. And, just go see for yourselves what you think of that. I think it'd be valuable. Another interesting, really small thing, but very interesting is the tiny home movement for housing the homeless, which has been one example of. It's kind of moved around in Globeville and Rhino. And it's driven by a pastor from Lakewood. And the idea is for homeless people who have the ability to work, have their mental facilities in place, and just need a place to sleep and be warm. And it would be interesting to see if that could work on a broader model. It's very difficult to get neighborhoods to accept the idea of having that within their neighborhood. But I think it's a non-governmental solution that's inexpensive. I think about $20,000 a unit, and can house 20 or 30 people in one place.
Right.
Maybe if I can just build on that employer model, I think is something that's really starting to come back. You mentioned the one in New York City. Henry Ford certainly did it in Detroit. Silicon Valley right now, Google's putting up $1 billion for new housing, and we launched a program here with the city and some private developers. Actually, Mike Zollner was a big sort of the brainchild of this. City's seeding this program with $1 million. It's called Live Denver, and it invites employers to come in and provide a stipend for housing for their people. The city will match it dollar for dollar. It works out to be about $200 from the company, $200 per month, $200 from the company, $200 from the city to subsidize rent. That gives the employee about a 2-year window for their income to catch up, to be able to live a little bit closer where they work, maybe a little bit higher quality place. That employer-assisted housing, I think, is going to have to be, as we think about the puzzle pieces, that's going to be one.
So my staff that's here from North Star Commercial Partners, I can just see tomorrow morning, they're going to say, hey, Brian, let's talk about that housing.
Where's my $200?
Okay, let's open it up to everybody. Just right quick, I want to make sure that when you state your question, try to make it more of a question instead of a full statement, and I need to repeat it so we can get it recorded, and then we'll have our guests address it from there. So let's start here.
This is maybe a question for Erin, but all three of you as well. It feels like the conversation on affordable housing is always taking a kind of Rube Goldberg approach to what seemingly is maybe a simpler solution, which is just market-based housing. We're always talking about how to create, not to take the cost of housing down, but how to subsidize people who can't afford that expensive housing. Why not just bring the cost of housing down through, a 90-day entitlement period that's promised through the government, through taking sales tax away from suppliers who are trying to build. If you want to come in and build an apartment building that's $150 or less a square foot, a single family home that's $250,000 or less, we'll take your sales tax away on the suppliers. We'll give free, no labor tax for the people who come in and build that. And by doing that, you're bringing down the cost of the developer and then bringing down the cost of the ultimate user as well without having to do any subsidies. Is that feasible? Is that something that people talk about?
Good question. So the question is,
I'm sorry.
is there a way of reducing and streamlining the process and cost to make it more affordable for the end user?
I think your ideas are really interesting. I have not heard them widely discussed. You do hear about reduced or waived water tap fees for affordable housing, which is actually a considerable expense. And there's been a lot of focus within ULI lately in addressing the rapidly rising costs of building construction, which I think has been like 1% a month for 4 years or something like that. Really a lot. So one of the new focuses is what can we do with modular housing, and can that help address this issue?
So as an example, just make sure we're on the same page, a residential developer, they can wait for entitlements that can take them a year. And all that time and cost and all that is built into their pro forma to get to that point. And then you also got to pay for things like sewer and all kinds of wonderful things and tap fees that have gotten very, very high cost. That is passed down to the end user. It's not like the developer's taking the hit in the chin. They're going to add up all their costs and they're going to try to make a profit and hopefully get someone to pay the difference. So Erin?
I participated in a stakeholder group last summer that was called by a couple of state legislators. And that was one of the topics of discussion, but they couldn't figure out a way to do anything about it because all of those things that you mentioned are local government issues. So even though I've heard a bunch of different ideas, and I think if you sat down and kind of did an audit of everything involved in development at the local level and got a list of everything that you mentioned and anything else, then I think it's time for the local governments to start considering that and kind of putting their money where their mouth is.
And that's an excellent point. So each local government is a fiefdom unto itself. And so what Aurora may be different than Lakewood than Boulder. And so you have to go before each one and kind of get through their process. And each one is completely different. And some are development friendly and some are not so much.
Yeah, we did a study or a survey last year of about 75 developers, construction companies, architects, you name it, all the folks that are involved in housing development, and asked them, is the permitting process getting longer, shorter, faster, slower, more expensive, more time consuming? And of course, it was consistently higher. It wasn't overwhelmingly higher. And when we polled developers who do work in other markets, it was, Denver is sort of inched up, but it hasn't become a coastal city type of situation yet. So we're bad, we're not horrible, maybe is the thing. To your question though, one of the things that would have to be watched, and to me this goes back to economics, if let's say the market rent is, just for simplicity, is $1,000, and you can build a unit for $900 or the equivalent, you just run the math. So you accept $100 return. If we find a way in this market to lower cost of construction down to $850, and the market demand or market price is $1,000, will the development community drop it to $950, or will they hold it and capture that? And so I think that's where the density bonus kind of discussions have come into play. Like you almost have to mandate that piece of it. I think over time as the supply gets built out, then that dynamic, that pricing model you described will work. But the first few could get the savings and not necessarily pass it on, and that wouldn't have to pass it on to the market.
Well, one more comment. The cost of building parking is really high. If you can figure out how to build less parking, which people are really working on, you can really reduce the per unit cost of building housing.
We're seeing a lot of that in downtown. There's a number of developments that are coming out of the ground with limited to almost zero parking. They're partnering up with the scooters, with Uber, with Car2Go. And so that's, if you think of a total cost of living, transportation's about 15 to 18%. And if you can reduce that for people, because construction costs are going up, the price of land is going up, there is that reality that has to be there. So if you can affect other pricing or other elements of cost, we're seeing some good success there.
Great. Where?
I don't want to be negative, but unfortunately, I think I have to be. I'm doing a lot of modular housing, and there's no price reduction. There's no cost reduction. There's no demonstrable reduction in cost. So we do not have that today. We have probably 36 plants being built across the country. So we have a prospect of having that down the road, but we also had that in 08. So all it's going to take is recession and
that wipes it out.
all of that out. And I think for me, the biggest problem is that the capitalization side of this is the big problem. It's the government that has to solve that, because the existing programs, the LIHTC program is basically going full bore, and it's not coming close to meeting the needs. And also 80% AMI is no longer a valid level of affordability. So we have to remind ourselves there is no affordable housing. There's only subsidized housing. What you're talking about is private subsidization. And there are some consortiums that are doing that, such as if you buy all of your materials through these consortiums, you can actually reduce some of the taxes you're talking about. So there are private sector things going on, but I think it's really going to have to be public-private. There's some interesting things in Denver going on with land trust activities where you can really reduce the cost of that end product because you've actually taken the land cost out of the model. And this isn't a question, I'm sorry, but as a developer for 35 years, I don't see the entitlement process as nearly, it doesn't add up on my spreadsheets to what you're talking about. And it's never, we're processing developments through municipalities that have a quarter of the staff that they had in 06, okay? And they're processing, as you said, 4 times the number of multifamily units today than they were back then. And that's not even coming close to the supply. So you can't press these government employees to process you any more quickly. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So just to repeat what you said, he is seeing no decrease in cost. He doesn't believe that there is a thing called affordable housing. Some creative things like land trust, and their staff issues with the government. Just a couple of high-level points there. So thank you, appreciate that. Ted? Oh,
No,
you want a suggestion?
Well, I don't know that we're necessarily disagreeing as a panel. I think I saw a study of the cost of housing, the land, the labor, the materials. The cost of the regulatory side is about 4% in that study. So you can squeeze it down to 0, and you haven't moved the needle all that much.
Yeah.
But that time factor, I have seen pro formas that have said I was supposed to get approved at this point in time. It's now a year later, it's still not approved, and prices have gone up 10%. That's real money. So we do have to be a little bit mindful of that.
Absolutely. Ted, and then we'll kind of work our way.
So obviously, a free market system, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We take care of itself. We obviously are not there. So here's an interesting challenge. I would like to ask, what would you do if you were hired within 5 years? I want you to provide affordable housing that everybody can afford, and you're totally in charge. You can do anything you want. What would you strategically do in the next 5 years to do this? And we'll pay you $100 million.
So, it's so funny. I was just at that conference yesterday, and they had the SpaceX people there and Tony Robbins and all that, and it's amazing some of those things when you challenge people at that level to offer them those kind of bonuses. So Ted's question is, if you could win a prize of $100 million to solve the problem completely across the board within 5 years, what would you do? So, want to start at the end and work this way?
First I
You
want
won't
to
be,
say,
by the way. I'm just saying.
first I want to say I'm going to split my winnings with my fellow panelists here. I would create a super agency that had the ability to repurpose surplus public lands of all kinds to create housing. And they would have the ability to say, whatever department you're not using that parking lot, we're going to give it to an affordable housing developer. And there's a subsidy, by the way, which is you're removing that land basis. It's not going to happen, but so maybe I'll only take 20 million.
Well, I would take his land and fill it up with all the tiny houses because they only cost $20,000.
Okay.
Not even use my
And they're 8 by
$100
20.
million to do it.
Oh, very nice.
That's good. That's why she's in politics, by the way. Just saying, she's that good.
And I have 4 kids. The first is going to college next week. I would need that money to go towards college tuition. I would go back to the density and the zoning that allows for density, and I would come up with a macro zoning overlay that allows for greater density. Especially, we have made and we're making big investments in transit. And we are not leveraging that infrastructure anywhere near enough. And so I would be hyper dense at every rail stop, the bus back and forth to Boulder, the bus back and forth to Fort Collins, the one down to Colorado Springs. At every interchange, at every bus stop, at every rail stop, we'd go massively vertical, hyper dense, and allow that to happen in a much more streamlined fashion.
When I was running for state treasurer last year, one of the things that we looked at is a lot of the unused office buildings and facilities that the state of Colorado has, and you'd be surprised how much unused real estate that there is. And I think they have a social responsibility, either use it or get out of the way and let the private sector use it, or somebody would put it into productivity. I think they're part of the solution as well, because we're paying our tax dollars on it right now to have a vacant building. We're going to probably finish up with 2 more questions, because then I want to make sure I get you respectfully out of here at 7 o'clock. So hold on one second. Why don't we take this one, and then we'll go over here, and then we'll come back to you. Hold on one second.
So my question essentially is, with the demographics being majority millennials at this point, and them sharing households, has anyone thought about micro units or dormitory style living with larger community spaces in kitchens, living rooms, that sort of thing, to combat some of this affordable housing? It's happening in Los Angeles and of course in Sweden as well.
So the question is, given especially the amount of millennials, has someone really looked at micro housing and shared housing, et cetera, with regards to that?
Yeah, it's the hot thing taking place right now. There's a couple of projects going up in Arapahoe Square, sort of ballpark area, that are going to prove that out. The project I described earlier that had about 20 spaces for about 160 units is all micro, shared kitchen. Everybody gets a bathroom, everybody gets a bedroom, and they share a kitchen, share a living room. Really amenitize the first floor and the rooftop decks on occasion to give them that sort of public space. So that's absolutely happening, and that's really going back to the past. I mean, that was something that was a 1920s solution as well, and we're seeing that here. So yeah, I think we're going to see more and more micro housing as an option.
One of those projects as you're going north on I-25, where Bronco Stadium is, that turntable used to be a hotel there. They turned that into a micro development. It's pretty interesting. I mean, literally, it's just kind of stand up, have a bed, and those kind of things. Anyone else want to answer that question?
Yeah, more of a personal opinion that I'm 6'5" and micro housing makes me claustrophobic. Actually, I think it's a niche solution. I mean, I lived in micro housing. They used to call them efficiency apartments when I was 23 years old. I just don't think it's the most humane form of housing. It's really, to me, like putting people in trays. And granted, there can be some of it, but are you going to move to a micro unit if it's a condo and live in it until you're 80? I don't think so. We're talking like 300 square feet here. I'd like to see a broad range of housing develop from, duplexes are a great solution. If someone buys a duplex and they can rent out half it, then they've got an income stream for life. So, for example, I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. Micro housing is not a broad brush solution. It's one of those 2% things.
Great. Why don't we go to our friend from Granby over there? You got a question?
Yeah, and this is a high issue in Grand Lake, and I'm not exactly sure what it is here in the big city, but how do you see Airbnb and VRBO with short-term rentals affecting the housing market, specifically the affordable housing market, in as much as it might reduce potential long-term housing in the city and then also where I live in the outskirts?
So how do you see Airbnb and some of these other creative models affecting it as well? Who would like to take that?
Randy, you have any stats on that for downtown?
I don't have stats, but I've got a couple examples where it's working in both directions. I mean, clearly it's driving up pricing. If you've got the ability to rent out through Airbnb and respectively run a hotel, it is driving up pricing. It's especially so in the resort towns, especially so in the urban core, Cherry Creek area, where if you've got an attractive location, I've seen the occupancy numbers for Airbnb in the center city. They're astronomical. The way they're leased up, it's through the roof. So it is a money-making opportunity, which then, of course, drives up the value and drives up the pricing for people who want to get in and just treat it as their home. It's really affected that. We've seen, so that's one sort of negative outcome of it that was unanticipated, unexpected. Another one is we're seeing apartment buildings being purchased and converting almost Airbnb-type hotels. So they're taking units out of sort of the housing environment, making them into sort of a modern, sort of strange hotel setup. But there is a new model downtown. If you're familiar with Union Station, there's a Whole Foods on the other side of Union Station. Above that is a development called the Union. It was the most expensive acquisition of an apartment per apartment in the market. It was within the last 3 or 4 months, and it was purchased by a company who's got a blend, what I would consider a blended model, where you can rent from me as the landlord. We have an arrangement that if you head out for the weekend, you're going to go see your parents, you're going to go to the mountains, wherever. You can make it available through Airbnb. We'll clean it, we'll manage it, we'll deal with the tenant, we'll clean it before you get back, we'll share the revenue. That allows this person to monetize their apartment a little bit and allows them to maybe make that unit a little bit more affordable for themselves. So if you're comfortable living with that sort of setup, it's a way to get into an apartment and it brings down, or it makes it a little bit more affordable that way.
Anyone else want to address it, or?
I heard of a neighborhood in Barcelona that has become popular with Airbnb and has lost 45% of their residents from 10 years ago. It's like all these issues we're talking about tonight. It's really complicated. It has a lot of pluses and minuses. Maybe there's a way of managing that better. I really like the Union Denver model. And I have an employee who's 32 who bought a house. She would not be able to afford it if she didn't Airbnb it when she went away for a weekend.
Great. Anything else? We're good? Okay. Well, we could go on asking these questions a while, but I want to thank you all for being here. I did a fun exercise upstairs. It just hit me, so I want to do it down here as well. And it's total participation by everybody in the room. Who has lived in Colorado more than a year? Raise your hand.
Sorry, buddy.
Who has lived in Colorado more than 5 years? Keep your hand raised. Those not, drop it. How about 10 years? How about 20 years? How about 30 years? Look around, Colorado's a totally, you can all put it down now. Colorado is a completely different place. I mean, for those of us who have been here for 30, 40 plus years, these are not issues that we ever dealt with. You couldn't get someone to live in downtown Denver. Rhino, where were you gonna live? Under the bridge? There was just nothing there. And it's just fascinating, some of the conversations we're having now. And it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem that we really need to address. And there was 2 comments tonight that I really, really liked. They were all very good, but there's 2 that just really resonated with me. One is that the conversation has changed and it is not going away. And it's only going to go away by putting good minds at the table, and you all are part of that dialogue. The other one that I really like, which I've never heard before, and just very interesting, there's about 50 answers, and they are about 2% each of the solution, right? Think about a lot of these bills and laws that we have. We think it's going to be a silver bullet that's just going to take care of everything. Well, you know what? It's about a dialogue and everybody being involved, and all of it's part of the solution. So I want to thank you all for being here. Our next events are going to be, the first one is on education. It's on Thursday, November 14th. If you know of any good speakers with regards to education and different models and choice and issues and all those kind of things, love to have it, bring them to the table. And the one after that is on transportation. That's going to be in January. So again, thank you all for being here, and feel free to come say hello to our panelists. Again, thank you.